Today I'm joined by Ben Smoker. Ben is the CEO of Sota, one of the UK's leading independent providers of professional IT managed services. So, welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks for inviting me on.
No, thank you for joining us. Look, Ben, before we move into things, tell us a little bit more about Sota and what the business is.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sota is an IT managed service provider. So we provide IT services, full spectrum, from support, connectivity, cloud services, cyber, virtually the whole landscape of cyber. We try and position ourselves, all IT services, heavily focused at the moment around cyber support and cloud. And we've been in business for 36 years. So we've seen a lot of technological changes in that time. We've, witnessed the PC revolution, birth of the internet, rise of cloud, evolving cyber threats, and now we're in this, heading towards this AI-powered world. So I'd like to think over that long period, we've seen a lot of transition and partnered with a lot of clients, and that we can sort of proud that we still say we've got today.
Well, okay, look, thanks for sharing that background. And so, Ben, you're currently, as I mentioned, the CEO of the business. You've only recently sort of stepped into that role. You've been with the business for what, that 12 years? Is that
Yeah, just under 12 years. Yep.
I got that right? So, um, well, let's go back a little bit first, Ben. So when you were, let's say 18, did you have ambitions of being a CEO of a company like Sota?
Um, I'd like to think so. I think, well, first of all, it's a long time to remember back. I think as a 19-year old, I was going off to university and studied maths. Obviously, I'm an accountant by trade, so that's what I kind of excelled at school. My sister had gone to university. I sort of fell into that path and did the same. Went locally to Canterbury. As I say, studied maths, and then you come out of that and you're like, what do I do now? And the classic dilemma that's facing a lot of people that come out of uni, and can I get a job? And I've just spent a load of money, and so fortunately my parents supported me through that. Um, Maths goes hand in hand with things like accounting. So started my training, was working in various industries, construction, moved around a little bit, got a bit of a love then for IT services, and went to a kind of bigger corporate, Capita, which is a big outsourcing firm. That was where I kind of feel I made my name. And then I wanted to move back closer to home. I wanted to feel, take my experience from a corporate environment into a smaller, a medium-sized business that I can enact some change and say, when I leave that company, I contributed to this. And I'd like to think that to date, so far, that has been the case.
Okay, and so as I mentioned, you've recently stepped up to the role of CEO. As you said there, your background is sort of more financial roles.
Yes.
Before you were CEO, you were CFO and FD. Um, what what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for you personally, moving from that sort of that financial background into and stepping up into that role of CEO?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a lot of nights I've spent in the run up to this thinking that exact same thing. I think anyone who says they don't worry about things like that, or they don't think they ever suffer from imposter syndrome, that's a thing. And someone, my mentor, actually said to me, people who suffer with imposter syndrome is because you're pushing your boundaries. If you never suffer from it, then you're not pushing your boundaries. So first thing that I feel I knew that I would bring to the role, is good governance. And that's, you do see a lot of CFOs or FDs eventually move to MD or CEO positions, and I think that gives the company a good grounding. You're quite a safe bet from that perspective. Outside of that, I'd like to think I'm not a stereotypical finance person. That's not to offend anyone working in finance. You know, as I've developed my career, I've realized you need to bring numbers to life. You have to have a personality. You need to be able to talk to people in the business in a non-financial way, which I feel that over the years I've got a lot better at. So I feel that I can positively impact Sota from that perspective. But the big thing for me that was the concern was we had a very intelligent, very technically backed MD before that was in the business for 31 years. Obviously, I worked with him for quite some time. So the challenge wasn't really for me. It was I was worrying how customers, our staff would, take to a different approach, of someone with a financial background rather than a technical background. I feel it's been wholly positive. I'm not technical, so I have to listen to people, and I think that's quite empowering. And I've seen that, in people in the business where I'm going to them and I just listen. I might not have all the answers, but they have the answers, and then they need to convince me this is the way we need to go. So it's been a really good experience from that perspective. Few doubts at the start. We're in a great place on a great trajectory, great journey we've got ahead of us, which I'm sure we'll come on to at some point.
I think I think what a great MD CEO does is surround themselves by great people.
Absolutely.
That's the key thing, isn't it? You can't, even MD CEOs don't know everything, aren't experts in everything. So it's surrounding themselves by the people that can support them. And if what would you say is the main role of a CEO? What would you say that is?
Yeah, so that's something that even when I moved from FD to CFO, I was asking myself, what's the difference between an FD and a CFO? I would like to think it's the same. If you was asking a question of an MD to a CEO, what's the difference? Is it just a fancy title that they give to someone to make them look, more current? I would like to think that it's far more strategic. So we are predicting what's going to happen in the future and how we future-proof this business, how other people future-proof their businesses, what are the emerging trends, how are we going to adapt, do we need to adapt, what are the challenges now? And outside of that, it's getting out and seeing customers. There is all of our businesses, we all have the same thing in common. There's a customer, at the end of that. And I'm trying to, every decision we make every day, I'm trying to put them at the forefront. I'm sure everyone says that, but I absolutely believe in that. So I couldn't do that without getting out and seeing some of our customers. So, I'm sure my role will evolve, but at the moment, I've been getting out in the first few months of that role, speaking to a lot of customers, understanding their challenges, and bringing things back to, in my mind, of why SOTA exists. Why do we, what do we do that makes people stay with us? We keep customers for a very long time. There must be a reason for that. So I'm trying to bring the strategy right back to sort of purpose, and promise, things like that.
A great explanation, Ben. And I think, yeah, I think with and I like the bit that you sort of said there about that strategy and thinking forward. And years ago, somebody said to me, or I read somewhere, that actually, as you go higher up in an organization, the distance of vision becomes greater. So like an MD, CEO is looking, sort of, 5, 7 years forward. The other directors might be looking, 3 to 5 years
Yep.
forward. Then you've got the managers that might be looking at, let's say, the next 12 months. So
Mhm.
gradually, as you sort of come down the organisation, the field of vision becomes sort of like slightly
Yeah.
shorter, but as you go up, it gets slightly longer. That's how somebody sort of
Yeah, no, I think you framed that really well. And then the challenge then is because you're looking 5 to 7 years into the future, it's how do you want to kickstart some initiatives because change is coming. The big thing for us is we know the pace that AI is gathering. But if I speak to certain people in the organization, I have to be careful to, not to scare them and to say, our whole world is going to change. Everyone's world is going to change. And how do we adapt as a business? How do we stay current? But respecting the fact that they have a day job, They're not paid to think 7 years into the future. So it's just, how that waterfalls down throughout the organization. I think it's, yeah, a good way of framed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that again, that's one of the challenges for a CEO, isn't it? Is looking forward, but then translating that to the team in terms of right, this is what we need to be doing, but without, as you say, sort of scaring or
Yeah.
and you mentioned there about, the environment, and in particular the technology environment is seeing another step change. I mean, you mentioned sort of some of the step changes earlier about the introduction of computers and this sort of thing. We're seeing another step change with AI, which is pretty dramatic and pretty fast. What what do you sort of see as the biggest challenges and opportunities in relation to this change in AI that we're seeing now?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of scaremongering. There's a lot of hype. Um, but we can't get away from the fact that it's coming and it's already here. And every business I go out and speak to, that in some way they're using AI, whether they know it or not. And maybe it's just a different terminology. Maybe it was just automation. Before that, the buzzword was just digital transformation, and now people are utilizing that to think, right, how do we cut costs? Yeah, how do we use AI to reduce our overheads? Where I see it as, use AI to enable growth. So, and it's just that mindset shift there of just putting it that way, because we speak to customers and you can see them. I can see them going, we can cut some heads there. They're not even saying it. But I really want to get across my passion for it in terms of, you need to be thinking further ahead. You might be able to remove some of these tasks with automation, with the use of AI. But where can you use those great people? Use them, I'm doing an MBA at the moment, and on that course, it was really intriguing to hear some of the things people said about AI. And this lady said, I caught one of the junior members of the team using ChatGPT to write an email. And I thought, that's a really interesting insight. Caught someone doing it. What's the problem with it? Embrace it. Yes. Okay, we've all seen it now where someone couldn't write an email before and now they've got perfect grammar, perfect English and well written. But put it in a different perspective, that person could now do something more valuable for the organization. If you cut out some of these mundane or routine tasks, how could that enable that person? How could that enable the business? So I think there's so many challenges, there's so many opportunities. For us, it's where we pitch that to various levels of clients, because some people don't use ChatGPT or Copilot at all. Some people are using it, and you've got your kind of your secret users of it, that don't want to come out and say that I'm using it. And then you've got your sort of mid-level firms and enterprise level that have already embraced it, been using it for ages, and there's a real exciting world of agentic AI that that they'll be embracing, if not already. So from my perspective, and sort of looping back to that strategic part, I'm looking at what's going on in the US, and how far ahead they are of us. From an IT managed service provider perspective, that they've already packaged these solutions. They're already selling it, and businesses out there are already embracing it. Whereas, our economy is not, and businesses are not quite ready for it at the moment. So there's a whole education piece at the moment, and I think that's where we have an obligation to fulfill that, and and do some educational bits along the way.
Well, perfect. I think that was a great explanation, and it actually links into a presentation well, webinar that was on sort of earlier this week, where somebody was saying a very similar thing. They were sort of saying, yeah, look, where AI is currently really helpful is like those administrative tasks.
Yeah.
But what that means then is that actually the people can focus on the value add tasks, the things that actually, that can really add value to a business rather than just the administration and processing and how we can save time. And that really, when you were talking then, it really sort of stood out to me in terms of, yeah, how can we repurpose the people that perhaps are currently doing the admin, where the AI can now do that, but actually they can be used to add additional value to the business, to them, and to see that growth that you said, rather than cutting costs. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, there's similar perspective there. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think then if you look at the challenge side of it, that's when the scary part comes in because, AI now has enabled bad actors to, more than ever to try and exploit businesses from a cyber perspective. We used to all be able to spot a mile off an email that was poorly written, and now with a load of social engineering and stuff like that and AI, that's kind of the scary bit, and that's the bit where I'm linking with that to say, here's the opportunity. This is what you can do to enable growth. We need to be thinking about cyber at the same time. So it isn't all a sales pitch. It's educational piece because we need to protect our businesses, and that applies to IT managed service providers as well. You'd be amazed, some of the things I've heard over the years where, that they've been the target of attack because you spend your life trying to protect your customers and you take your eye off the ball internally. So I think there's massive opportunities, massive threat, and it's finding the right balance between that.
excellent. No, I agree. And linked into this, it's been openly publicised that you've got challenging growth targets over the next sort of 5 years. But the thing I'm really interested in, which links into what you just sort of said, is your strategy that underpins that, of people and customers first,
Yeah.
which underpins, as I understand it, that growth strategy. So tell us a bit more about that strategy of people and customers first.
Yeah, I mean that is everything I believe in, as you just summed up. It's our people and it's our customers. And as I said earlier, it's every decision we're making, every interaction. I'm thinking, how does that impact our people? How does that impact or benefit our customers? So, yeah, I frame Sota as kind of the 36-year-old best kept secret in the IT managed service space. We're not heavily sales enabled. You won't see tons and tons of marketing out there. And that's been our strategy that's worked over the years. We've been customer first. We've, provide the right solutions. We've been very successful in terms of referrals off of the back of that, and people moving around. They go to another company. So it's a good, firm. Let's speak to them. So we've been very fortunate. So in my mind, it's like if we can be that successful without that investment in sales and marketing, what could we do? With a bit more focus in that area. So certainly our strategy um, and forecast for the next 5 years will be focused around that. And at the heart of that is people and customers. So, a big initiative we're looking at the moment is around our levels of service. And everyone I speak to, I always ask the same thing and say, where would you rate your support function? And some people are honest, maybe too honest, but mainly most people are a 7 or 8 out of 10, if it's fair. And it's that's our opportunity. If we're a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10, if our competitors are a 7 or 8 out of 10, there's opportunity there. Why can't we be an 8 or a 9? And as I said, there's a customer at the end of all of this. So how can we create an experience where they never consider having to need another IT partner? How do we create these kind of wow moments where they're like, wow, that is value add? So yeah, the strategy at the heart of all of this is people, customers. Yes, we have to have growth targets, but growth will take care of itself. If you get the things right around people, customer, innovation, the growth will take care of itself anyway.
Yeah, and again, I agree, Ben. It's a lot of businesses, focus on certain key factors, like whether it's growth or getting more customers or more profits, or growing revenue. But actually, what you're doing is focusing on the things that contribute to those
Yes.
items, not just focusing on those items. So it's actually, well, okay, what are the things that contribute to us, growing the business, getting, getting more revenues, getting more profit. Let's focus on those things, which in your case is focusing on people and customers.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, particularly linking into what we've said about the technology and where that's going, quite often gets forgotten that there is actually people behind this and customers behind this. We go to the extent of automating things, but actually what you're doing is having, no, okay, well, let's automate, let's, use AI, whatever. But behind that is people and customers. We want to use automation to give a better service,
Yes.
not just to make things easier for us to process or do.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, I like it.
I
No,
think
that's
I
great.
think
And
it's building, as you just described, that short-term view of just chasing a revenue target or a profit figure. We have to do it. There's people in all businesses, whether you're a business owner, whether you're in finance, everyone needs to keep their eye on their revenue, their profit, their cash flow. We can't get away from that. So I'm not being sort of blasé to say growth will take care of it. So we have targets, but it's do we just chase the short-term targets, which is that shorter term view? Or, as you said, if we focus on all the parts that contribute to success, well, then we're building for the next 5 to 7 years. We're building a sustainable business rather than one for today, one for tomorrow. That's just my opinion on it.
that's great, and thank you for sharing that. And I think look, people watching that and listening to this will be really interested, and that's what this is all about. Sharing those views, sharing those opinions. So, Ben, look, there's one question that I always like to ask everybody that's kind enough to join me on this, and actually it takes us a little bit of a full circle to back to a question I asked at the beginning. But what is the best advice that you would give to an 18-year-old you? So if you could go back and speak to yourself when you're 18, what would you say to yourself?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I like to. We're a big believer at Sota in apprenticeships. Um, yeah, the previous MD, he started 31 years ago as an apprentice, worked all his way through to MD. Probably won't be replicated again, but it's a great good news story for young people coming into the business. That you can, you can forge a career if you base it on principles of working hard. For me, I've been a lifelong learner. So I'm always looking for the next thing. So I think if I'd have gone back to that, and we say it to our own kids, right? I've got a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. I'm saying to them, what are you going to do? Let's try and, plan this out together. And, we've had it when our parents have said it and they just don't know. So actually, if I went back to my 18-year-old self, I would just say, don't worry, work hard, focus, have passion in whatever you do, and you might change path along the way, but keep those principles at heart, be honest, and that will stand you in good stead. And just don't worry about that. Of course, we're the ones worrying for our own kids. We're going, what jobs will there be? Bringing it back to AI. We're like, what jobs, are the growth areas for them? But yeah, I just don't buy into the fact of going back and asking 16-year-olds, 17-year-old, 18-year-olds, let's make a plan now, because we all know how life changes along the way. And it's still, still changing at my age. So, it's going to change a lot for them.
Again, great advice. And look, one of the reasons I asked that question is because similar to you, I've got a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old, and I love to share this with people. And look, again, I completely agree with you. When I was that age, I had no idea what I wanted
Yeah.
to do, and you just find your path. So again, I think great advice. Work hard, but don't worry.
Yes.
It will work out. So. Well, look, Ben, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and sharing more about Sota, but also your journey as well. So thank you very much.
No, thank you very much for inviting me on. It's a pleasure.